My name is Brad Roberts, and this is what I have to say. Down here in the south, riding horses is still a fairly popular hobby amongst many folks. There are many different types of riding, but I have always been keen to trail riding myself. Trail riding is just what it says it is, riding your horses through trails in the woods, mountains, hills, and hollers. As anyone from around here, Tennessee, would tell you, it gets hotter than the devil's nutsack down here, especially during the summer months. This is to say, when it is summertime, trail riding takes place at night. Often we wait until early fall to begin riding because the weather makes it easier, but during the summer, we ride at night. These rides are always a time and a half. It's usually just a small group of us that gets together. We all get together at the edge of the woods, find the trailhead, and from there, we set out together for a long night of trail riding through some of the South's last uncivilized land. This particular story and ride took place in early August, 3 years back. My father and I met up with our friends, JR and Atik, around 8 p.m. at a place known to the locals as Gilly Hill. It has this name because the trailhead is behind the Gilly Hill Church of Christ and Cemetery. I know, it sounds bad already, but this has been the only trailhead to this ride for as long as I can remember, and it's never caused any sort of problems. So, like I said, we set off for a long night of horse riding, and for everyone but me, a long night of drinking too. Now, I never drank when we rode because I wasn't of age and was our designated driver, so to speak. I am aware that this all may sound very dangerous or even strange, but I assure you that it's not. At least not to us anyway. Gilly Hill is full of well-traveled trails during the winter, but during the summer, people don't ride as much, and the trails grow up, making it easy to get lost or at least turned around. Horses are smarter than most folk give them credit for, though. They have a tremendous sense of direction and can see well at night. The only problem with horses being able to see at night is that in order for them to maintain their vision, it needs to remain dark. This leaves you without anything to improve your vision while you ride a 1,000-pound animal in the dark through the middle of a wooded nowhere. The only exception to this is one may use a dim light with a red bulb and red lens. For whatever reason, which I'm sure someone here can explain, these lights won't make your horse night blind, as we call it. Aside from that, the only light that we have comes from the glow sticks everyone ties to the front and back of their saddles so we can keep up with each other easily. Anyway, back to that August night. Hours came and went with nothing out of the ordinary happening as we rode and covered a lot of ground, constantly putting more distance between us and our horse trailers. Now, I guess it was around midnight when I made the comment that I was hungry and had brought food to cook, implying that I wanted to stop for more than a few minutes to build a fire and eat. Unsurprisingly, I was not the only hungry one because we immediately stopped and within a few minutes had a fire roaring and hot dogs roasting. When we would stop for any period of time, we would always tie our horses to trees in a circle and gather in the middle to do our thing. This was done especially at night for more than one reason. First, because it allowed everyone to relax a little as we all kept an eye on the horses together and make sure that they didn't run off. This happened before, and it's nearly impossible to catch a wild horse in the woods at night. The second reason is because horses are very alert animals that have superb hearing, so by having them form a circle around us, it served as a natural alarm to any unwanted visitors, human or not. After all, we were in the middle of nowhere in the woods at night. The horses formed a circle, and inside the circle, we all sat by fire, eating, drinking, and carrying on. I suddenly had the urge to piss, so I stood up and walked out a few yards to the other side of my horse to go. It was there and then that I noticed a dim light, about 50 or 60 yards away, give or take. This wasn't completely strange, but it triggered my nerves to say the least. If someone was out there with a flashlight or headlamp, that meant that they were on foot. And who would be this far out, this late, walking through the woods? I finished my business and just stood there for a few seconds, staring at the light. I slowly began to realize that it was moving towards us, a little at a time. Still, something wasn't right about it. The light was just moving closer and closer in a straight, smooth line. If it was a person with a flashlight, the light would be moving and shaking as they were walking through the woods. A voice hacked through the thick summer air from behind me, and I about jumped out of my boots as I turned around to see my dad walking up beside me. "What are you doing? You still pissing? It's been 10 minutes. He asked me in a semi-slur through a chuckle. I could tell the peach brandy was doing work on him. No, Dad. Well, I mean, yes, I was finished, but I noticed that light over there. Who the hell you reckon is out here this late? I replied. He squinted and peered out towards where the light was. He was quiet for a minute before speaking again. That's weird. Has it moved at all? I explained to him that it had moved, but it didn't seem right, as it was just getting closer, but it didn't look like someone walking. He shrugged it off and suggested that we put the fire out and get moving, just in case the light is a landowner that had changed their mind about letting us ride out here. The land was owned by the church, but they sometimes rented it out for people to farm a couple of fields that sat on top of the hollers, and these people often weren't fans of horse riders. So we actively avoided them, which was easy on hundreds of acres. An hour or so later, we decided to stop again for the drinkers to relieve themselves of the beer and the liquor that they had been drinking since we began the ride. This time, I stayed on my horse as I didn't need to go, and I did not want to tie him up just to untie him in a couple of minutes again. I was sitting there, taking in the cool breeze that had finally decided to show up when my horse, Zeb, became agitated. Zeb started breathing heavily and shifting his weight back and forth from side to side, a clear sign that he was uneasy about something. I was unsuccessfully attempting to calm him down when, out of nowhere, my dad's horse bolted. He went from standing still to a wide-open run. My dad, who had just finished peeing, was holding onto his reins in one hand and zipping his pants with the other. The sudden jerk knocked him on his ass. In that split second, I had a choice to make. Let the horse go and face the likelihood that we not only just lost a $3,000 animal, but that being the youngest, I would have to let my dad ride my horse while I walked back beside him. I contemplated momentarily, and then made what was probably the worst decision of my life. Zeb was moving so fast that my eyes were watering. Still, I tried to keep my focus on the glow stick that was swinging back and forth in the back of the saddle as his horse barreled through the woods. It didn't go unnoticed that my dad's horse was running back in the same direction where I had noticed the light earlier, but I tried to put that thought away, as for the moment, I just needed to catch him. I should have just let it go and went back to my dad and our two trail buddies. We could have gone back to the trail and waited until daylight to look for the horse, but I was young and proud. I could catch it, or so I thought anyway. By now, I had lost track of the distance Zeb and I had put between us and the others. My only focus was that bouncing glow stick. I was gaining ground on the wild horse. Just a little closer and I could get a hold of him and bring him back, when the glow stick vanished. I pulled back on the reins and shouted, "Whoa, easy, easy." Zeb came to a stop so fast that I thought I was going to fly over his ears. But where had the glow stick gone? If it had fallen off, I would have seen it, or at least seen it now. I was close to where it disappeared, from the best that I could guess. Yet, nothing. I decided to get off my horse, tie him to a tree, and look for the glow stick on the ground. After a few minutes of kicking leaves around, I couldn't find anything. I walked over to Zeb and pulled my flashlight out and scanned the area around me, accomplishing nothing, except for giving up my position, I would later discover. The horse had just vanished. But how could it? I was standing there, rationalizing what had just happened, when I noticed the light. It was back and was about 50 yards away. This time, it was moving towards me a little quicker than before, but still in the same smooth manner. I was now beginning to be afraid. I went back to my saddlebags, pulled out my camping hatchet, attached it to my belt and grabbed my cell phone. 9 times out of 10, we have no cell phone service at all, but it was worth trying, I suppose. To my surprise, I had one bar. All right, I thought. I will call my dad and ask him if his horse had showed back up, and then tell him to blink his flashlight in my direction so I could find my way back to the group. The phone only rang once when he answered.
Hello, Brad? What the hell are you doing?
I'm just down the trailhead, some dad. I can't find your horse. Listen, we'll have to come back and look for him tomorrow, I said.
What?
He replied, and I noticed he sounded confused and unsure of what to say. It must be the drinking, I thought. So I tried to speak slower and clearer this time. Dad, I didn't catch your horse. We'll have to try tomorrow. Dad didn't respond for a few minutes, before finally saying,
Brad, you're worrying me. What are you talking about, catching my horse? How could you catch him? I'm sitting on him right now. Why did you take off like that? Come back now. This isn't funny. Just come back now. Come back now. Come back now. Come back now.
My blood ran cold. I just ran off? What was he talking about? I was chasing his horse. Dad? I was chasing him after he ran off and I lost his trail. What do you mean you're sitting on him? Did he circle back or something? I asked, hesitantly. My dad was now basically shouting into the phone at me.
No, I told you cut it out. Just come back now. Come back.
And with that, my phone beeped and I looked down at the screen and it read, call dropped, no service. Of course. I was frozen in my tracks. I know I saw his horse run off. I'm not crazy. Hell, I chased it for 10 minutes. I took a few minutes to get myself together before getting back on Zeb. I noticed the light I kept seeing hadn't moved any closer. I turned my horse to head back in the direction of my dad when I saw a light come on from where they all must have been waiting. As I started back in that direction, the light ahead of me started blinking. I was finally calming down and feeling relieved when I remembered I never told my dad to flash his light at me on the phone. I stopped Zeb and turned back towards the other light. It was now moving towards me and blinking as well. What the hell was happening? Now I was officially terrified when my phone vibrated. I pulled it out and looked down at the screen, and it was a text from a number that I didn't recognize. I opened the text and it read, Brad, it's Dad. My phone's in the truck. Horse came back. Where are you? Sweat dripped from my forehead and my hand shook as I read the message again. Brad, it's Dad. My phone's in the truck. Horse came back. Where are you? I felt like an idiot. I knew my father never brought his cell phone when he rode. He always stuck his phone and wallet under the floor mat for safekeeping, as well as to protect them from being lost. But if that was true, then who had I talked to? The person asked me why I ran off and why I was trying to catch their horse. Clearly, they had some idea of what was going on. Hell, maybe they had been watching us. Whatever the case was, I did not like it. The land we rode on was owned by the church. I knew that much, but I didn't have a clue about the surrounding property. The Gilly Hill Church of Christ is fairly isolated, so it was safe to assume that the land surrounding it was as well. We are talking about hundreds of acres that are nothing but wooded mountains and hills. It isn't like this was farmland that was being worked and watched on a regular basis or anything. We very rarely encountered any other people here. The only issue we ever ran into was disgruntled hunters that were trying to hunt illegally on the church's property. Multiple horses and drunken riders do a pretty good job at scaring off any deer that might be in the area. I did my best to calm myself down a bit. I needed to take care of business and backtrack to where I left my dad and the others. It could have been fear or just a little paranoia, but I took the glow sticks off my horse and stuck them in my saddlebags. If someone was following me, I wasn't going to help them. Plus, they were only there for the other riders to be able to see me, and I was alone now. The lights I mentioned seeing earlier were still blinking and coming from both directions, ahead and behind me. I was fairly sure which one was coming from where I estimated my dad to be, so that's the one I used as my North Star, so to speak. Sure, it seems easy enough to know which way I'd come from, but these woods ain't your run-of-the-mill dark. They are so dark that you can't see past your horse's ear when you're in the saddle. The only saving grace is the occasional opening in the trees where the moon can shine through and illuminate the surrounding area. It seemed like Zeb was tiptoeing as we slowly headed towards the blinking light. Old Zeb always was light-footed when he sensed something was off, or at the very least when he could tell that I was uneasy. Horses are strange like that, keen to their surroundings, and Zeb was one of the best horses I'd ever owned. He was well-mannered, calm, and when you needed him to hit another gear, boy, could he fly. Zeb and I had made it a few 100 yards closer to the light when it simply disappeared. Still hopeful that it was my dad or one of the others holding the flashlight, we kept traveling in that direction. We had almost made it to the edge of the clearing where we had stopped earlier when my dad's horse took off, when I started faintly smelling something similar to mothballs. As we got closer to the clearing, the smell got stronger. I pulled the reins back and quietly instructed Zeb to stop with a, "Whoa now, whoa." We instantly came to a complete stop, now just outside of where the moonlight started at the edge of the opening. I noticed that there were two large piles of mounds or masses of something, just on the other side of the clearing, back in the woods a bit, but they were too far out of the light for me to figure out what they were. I sat on the back of my horse in complete silence, trying to figure out what the hell I was seeing. I heard a branch from above break and something made a loud thud on the ground, mere feet in front of us. It stood just in the light from the moon, making it barely visible. It was eye level with the back of my horse and was lean as a telephone pole. Its large eyes glowed with solid soft white light that flickered as we stood frozen, gazing upon each other. The eyes reminded me of a movie projector, the way they cast dim light out ahead of its body. This creature slowly lifted both of its long arms out to either side as it stood in front of us, unmoved. It held something round in its right hand, but I couldn't make out what it was. Zeb, following a brief pause, stood straight up on his back legs and threw me off so fast that I didn't have time to react. I landed on my back, slamming my head into the ground, and a sharp point shot down my spine. In a panic, I tried to get to my feet, but dizziness took over me, throwing me down to my knees. Everything was spinning, including Zeb, who brought his front hoofs down as he spun on a dime, and like that, he was gone, with my cell phone, flashlight, and other supplies in his saddlebags. Pure panic and adrenaline filled my body. I was scrambling on my hands and knees, occasionally making it to my feet, only to take a few steps and trip or fall down again in pain. I heard a loud thud, and Zeb neigh from behind me. I didn't know where I was going except that it was away from whatever the hell that thing was. I kept putting as much ground as possible between me and the creature as fast as I could. I couldn't turn and look behind me without tripping over something in the dark, but I heard a voice, my father's voice. It was slurred and sounded like he was drowning. It began repeating,
"Brad, You're worrying me. Catch my horse. Catch my horse.
It took nearly all of my strength, but I made it to the other side of the clearing and bound into the woods, finding a small tree to hold myself up with. And the thing's voice kept ringing out. This thing didn't sound right. I had a death grip on the tree. I was afraid that I would hit the ground again if I let go. I turned to look behind me, and what I saw turned my stomach upside down. The wide-eyed thing had somehow caught my poor horse. How it could have moved that fast or been that strong, I don't know. But just in view of the moonlight at the other edge of the clearing, on the other side, I could see the back of the thing as it stood holding one of Zeb's legs in its hand, down by its side and slightly offset in front of him. I could see it dragging Zeb's body by his front legs in a desperate panic, and he was attempting to get away. But it was useless. Between the pain and what I had just seen happen to Zeb, I spilled the contents of my stomach on the ground in front of me. I had to move. I had to get away from here. I turned back in the other direction to head deeper into the woods. Fear was pushing me harder and faster than I thought I could move, considering the pain that I was experiencing. Eventually, I had to stop for a moment to gather myself. I fell to my knees. My body didn't even give me a choice. It felt somewhat safer now, though, that I had finally put some distance between me and the clearing that thing occupied. And that's when I noticed that I was just feet away from the two mounds I had noticed before the horse threw me. My heart instantly filled with dread. I knew then that nothing good was going to occur in these woods that night. As quietly as I could, I inched slowly towards the large lifeless objects, and before long, I stood looming over one of them. It was JR and his horse, minus both of their heads. The horse's neck and all of JR, they looked like they had been gnawed on by a horse-sized dog or something. I stumbled backwards in terror, afraid to approach the other mound, but I had to know if it was my dad or not. I am ashamed to admit the relief that I felt when I looked upon the mangled body of Atik's horse. I spun around and quickly scanned the rest of the area, and there was no sign of my father, nor Atik. Thank God. I bent over, placing my hands on my knees, drawing deep breaths from the humid Tennessee air as my head spun. A million thoughts were racing through my mind. Where were they? Had they escaped? How far could they have made it? How far could I make it? What the hell was that? My moment of solitary was soon shattered when a loud version of my father's voice broke the silence from behind.
Come back now, Brad. This isn't funny.
I pushed through the rest of the night, one step in front of the next, as my father's voice echoed through the hollows. It had long become clear that my back was injured from the fall. Every step that I took was a painstaking reminder. The severity of my injuries was a mystery, though, but the loss of feeling in my left hand, that wasn't. As the sun rose, there was still no sign of my dad or Atik, nor the horrendous creature that attacked us. Heat came from above and plagued my skin. My best guess was it was somewhere around 1 PM and nearing 100 degrees. My location, on the other hand, I couldn't have even begun to calculate. And then I passed out. I woke up in the hospital some days later. They said that I was dehydrated and had experienced severe trauma to my leg. The police had been waiting outside of my room when I woke up, and boy, did they have some questions. Where was JR, Atik? Where was my father? I knew the answer to 2 for sure, and had a good idea about the other. I lied to the police though, naturally. I told them that we were ambushed by some angry hunters and gave them fake descriptions. They would have never have believed me. I wasn't going to be written off as a crazy, not after everything that I went through. My family was allowed in after the police finished their questioning, and they were ecstatic to see me and worried about my father. I lied to them too and told them that he died before we made it out. Well, it was mostly a lie, but the likely probability was that he had died. There was no reason for them to know the truth. The Gilly Hill Church of Christ minister even visited me, and I actually told him the truth. Strangely though, he didn't respond. He just said God bless and left. I spent a week in total in the hospital, and to this day, I carry a limp. The bodies of my father and the others, they were never recovered, and all that was found of the horses were the hooves and the saddles. There was a long court process, and because they never found anything, they couldn't pin it on anyone, including me. To this day, I still don't know what happened back there. I've scoured the internet, trying to find anything that would give me a clue as to what this thing was, but I haven't found anything really. All I can say, and all I do know, is that I haven't been trail riding since that day.